Dear friends, returning to this Uposatha Sila day-long meditation, I think the schedule says there's another Dhamma talk happening right now, but I think it will be better if we start with some meditation. So, I want to invite you to be sensitive to the state of mind. It's a second meaning of Pachavekana, this reviewing, that a person may sit for meditation and then be able to review and be aware of what's changing internally through the meditation practice. So, without giving more explanation of that, we can sit for meditation, but I just invite you to see if whatever arises, what you can be aware of about this state of mind. Coming to an upright posture. If the mind wandered during the lunch break, thinking about all kinds of different things, now deciding to come back to the present moment, being aware of the physical body, the posture of the body on the seat or the cushion, the weight of the body. Aware of the sensation, part of touching from the top of the head to the toes. Any sensation at the top of the head? At the side of the head? At the face? At the neck and shoulders? On the arms? On the hands? At the front of the body? In the legs? And the lower legs? In the feet? The sensations in the feet? On the lower legs? On the upper legs? at the seat, at the lower back, the upper back, back of the neck, back of the head, top of the head, scanning from the top of the head down and from the feet up, aware of the touching sensations. And when the mind has started to settle down, can let go of the scanning procedure and just be aware of touching wherever it's noticeable. aware of the touch of breath, aware of the feeling, what it's like right now. Aware if the mind is more bright or more dull. If the mind is dull, give more attention to the touch points, where the hands touch, where the feet touches, where the bottom touches the seat, where the breath touches. Move awareness clearly to those touch points to overcome a dull mind. But if the mind is bright, can simply relax and watch. Aware if the mind is restless or calm. If the mind is restless, take a narrow object for practice, like just the touch sensation where the breath is noticeable. But if the mind is very calm, can allow open awareness for whatever comes to mind by the senses, just staying in the present moment. I'll continue with a Dhamma reflection about Paccavekkhana. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a tea break. Then following tea, we'll have time for more questions and discussion, closing with meditation. So that's my idea for this afternoon's program. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. This morning, as we were speaking about Paccavekkhana, or the power of reflection, we were emphasizing that karma is depending on one's intention. And if we are able to have the power to choose our intentions, if we have the power to cut off unwholesome intentions, if we have the power to cultivate wholesome intentions, then we have the capacity for doing wholesome karma, which is conducive to our happiness and welfare for a long time. Another one of the examples that came up earlier this morning in our discussion is when a person has a mixture of intentions. If we are, for example, doing something generous, but in one corner of the mind, there's a little bit of conceit or a little bit of jealousy, so that there's a mixture going on. I'd like to, in a way, encourage making a useful distinction between an intention, meaning a decision to do something, and a mood or an emotion, which is how we might feel while we're doing it. So there's a beautiful example that's given in the, I think it's in it's either the Sangiti Suttas or the chanting by numbers. This is at the end of the Digha Nikaya. It mentions 4 ways to gain liberation. The fast and pleasant way, the slow pleasant way, the fast and painful way, or the slow painful way. And the fast and pleasant way is described as somebody who has purity of karma, freedom from hindrances, freedom from afflictions, and they are applying wise effort. And then the slow painful way, or the slow pleasant way, they have a purity of intention, but they're not applying very much wise effort. They're sort of just allowing things to move along at their own pace without pushing it. But the one that was especially touching to me, as it was explained in the commentary, was the slow, painful way of obtaining liberation. And the explanation given in the commentary is a bhikkhu who has a lustful character. So they're plagued by sensual desire. But by making a lot of effort, they're able to preserve the brahmacharya way of life. And so they don't violate the third precept. They keep their celibacy. And after practicing for a long time, they still have a character which is filled with lust. And with tears and sweat, they make the supreme effort to preserve their virtue, even though their emotions are going in a different direction. And it said that even that bhikkhu or even that monk is able to obtain the full fruits of this path of practice. So that example, I think, is given to show something that forming a clear intention and doing a good thing, regardless of what your mood is or what your emotions are, can be powerful and effective. So just because there is, like, greed is present in the mind, does not mean that we are still able to choose to do something generous. So generosity and greed are considered, sort of like opposites. But a person can acknowledge that, there is something within them that's like a feeling, like a tone, something in the mind which is pulling towards greed. But they've decided, no matter, regardless of that, I'm going to not obey my greedy emotions. And instead, I'm going to choose to do what is generous, or I'm going to choose relinquishment as a way of counteracting the greed and eventually helping to retrain the mind so the mind can gradually come out of that tendency of that greedy mood or that greedy state of mind. If one is feeling angry, but you don't kill and you don't harm, you could say that perhaps that intention is even more praiseworthy, more meritorious, because you have overcome your emotions in order to control your action. And so I want to say this so that you can feel encouraged that you have the power, you have the authority, you have the agency to choose what acts you're going to do. And when some kind of affliction or some negative thought comes into the mind, you can choose whether to welcome that afflictive thought or whether to not welcome it. I sometimes use the expression, "Thank you for sharing." So if I say that the mind has, thought of something that's actually unwholesome, I say, well, like there's something because of causes and conditions, how I was brought up, what the social environment is, just being a human being, the kind of body that I have, who knows for what reason. So some kind of thought might arise, which is not a thought that I welcome. And I simply acknowledge that's what it is. It's not wholesome. If I pick up this thought, it could have a lot of harmful results down the road. And then with that expression, thank you for sharing, I say thank you, but no thank you. I'm not picking up this thought. We can do this. This is the power of intention. In the end, to reprogram the mind, or even you could say reprogramming the subconscious, so that those afflictive, negative, harmful thoughts would not come up anymore. That is the goal of the training. So when a negative thought comes and we feel in a way sort of repulsive towards that bad thought, and we don't tolerate that bad thought, we don't even imagine that it would be okay, maybe it's a moment I don't have anything that I have to do, I'm just resting or something like that. I'll just have fun thinking about hating somebody for 10 minutes and it won't really do any harm. No, we don't think that way. Instead, we say that it's a danger, that if we give the opening to the thought to kind of like chewing on a grudge. This is, I think, what cows do. They chew on the cud. I don't know exactly what that means, but they've got something in their digestive system. I guess it comes after the mouth that the grass is in there, and they've got an extra mechanism, like in their throat or something, and they can take the grass that's partly it's been swallowed anyway, and they're just grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding, like chewing on the cud. So when we have let's suppose if it were a greedy thought going into some daydream about getting the beautiful tasty thing that we feel greedy about, or if we feel remorse and regret, and we are into rehearsing yesterday and thinking that yesterday could have been different if only I had said that instead of saying this, that maybe it would have turned out differently, and sort of like chewing on yesterday that way. Or if somebody is caused us to feel angry, and we are rehearsing the other person and saying, well, if they shouldn't be like that, they should be like that. That these kind of thoughts are in a way nurturing and giving a space and food and room, giving nutriment for unwholesome tendencies to be able to take root and to grow. And if we have had the good fortune to know what it is to be free from all the hindrances, if some of the time, perhaps while in meditation, or perhaps while engaged in doing something that's very wholesome together with wholesome companions, we have some period of time in which, like all of our hatred, our greed, and our delusion, our fear, our anxiety, our all those negative emotions are just, they're not around during that amount of time. And it could especially be a wonderful something that can happen in meditation, that we experience it's free. how significant and precious it is to be free from those afflictive states of mind. So we got that experience. We know it's possible. And then we have learned from the teaching that we could wipe out those tendencies completely. And we've learned about the danger of entertaining those tendencies in terms of making them become established and come stronger. And we've learned the benefit of when those mental tendencies are disappeared, either completely disappeared or temporarily disappeared. We know how healing, how wholesome, how beautiful, how strengthening, and how beneficial it is when we can go for whatever length of time being secluded from those unwholesome states of mind. And having made those discoveries, then perhaps our value system may shift a little bit. I said at the beginning that if a person has a mind full of lust, but they keep their celibacy anyway, that's a good intention. It's admirable to have a good intention like that. If the mind is affected by greed, and yet we act with generosity and do something generous, or we do something with renunciation, that what we do is the powerful thing. And despite the fact that there may be a presence of a feeling or emotion, that nevertheless the choice we make is very powerful. But then later on in our practice, after we've had a chance through meditation to discover the value of the state of mind, which is free from the negative dhammas, then that becomes an end in itself. And then at that point, we really do wish to not just control our actions and speeches. We don't only wish to give up a mental unwholesome karma. In my opinion, that doesn't mean necessarily just that a bad thought came up, or a negative, an afflictive emotion comes up without asking. That, to my idea, would not be an unpleasant, an unwholesome mental act. It's just a feeling that came along. But an unwholesome mental action would be plotting one's revenge, would be like mentally rehearsing to do something unwholesome. There's like a much stronger mental energy. So first you stop that rehearsing and mentally enacting some unwholesome deeds. But then later on, even when those those thoughts or those emotions that bubble up from the subconscious that come up without our asking and without our intending, we do see the danger in that, and we want to see how can we make a modification. How can we let go and abandon those afflictive thoughts that come along, and how can we abandon them in a way that it doesn't come back? to my experience, that training of what is bubbling up from the subconscious, it's possible to do that training, but we are not able to directly see the training because the training is happening in the subconscious. We just, with patience and faith, follow the suggestions of the Noble Path and all of the methods of training that are given to us in the suttas, with the belief that these things are conditioning at the conscious level that we can be aware of, and they're also placing some conditioning at the subconscious level. I was, I don't know if it's a blessing, it's just a fact. When I was earlier in my monastic life, I experienced over a fairly short period of time the death of 5 different family members, well, 4 family members and my best friend passed away over a period of 10 years. And the agitated depression, lamentation, distress, and upset were really prominent for some of them. And then, of course, every death is different. Later on, I noticed that, first of all, despite whatever anxiety or whatever might be present, that I was able to be fully conscious and aware and to recognize what was happening and to watch what was happening and to watch what was happening with my relative and to watch what was happening within me in connection to that experience of going through the dying process. And later on, there wasn't any of the same level of this extreme reactivity that I had before of the grief and agitated depression that I had experienced at the beginning. I no longer experienced that I had been wounded because I didn't have the same sort of like identification that having my dear relative together with me was like part of who I am, and that I'm the person who's connected to this family. And so then, to whatever extent, subconsciously, I had made that part of my identity. And then when my relative died, I felt like my arm had been cut off. But then later on, having cultivated the awareness of impermanence, cultivated reflecting about non-self, reflecting, just reflecting the reality of dukkha, that then I know that, it didn't have in any way like the same severe impact because something had shifted, and it wasn't because of my conscious mental training. It was both the conscious and at the subconscious level that there was not that clinging and that identification. So this Paccavekkhana, this practice of reflecting, I want to invite you to think of being aware of your state of mind, not to be continuously psychoanalyzing yourself, but just in a way which is somewhat direct and simple, to be aware of your state of mind. It's as simple as like, I want this, I don't want that. Just acknowledging that. Like if it's time the meal is coming to be served, and if the mind, says, I want some food, just know that. Or if it's different and it's just say, the food grade is not present, I'm just going to take just enough to preserve my health, and it's not really touching me emotionally in that same way with craving. You could give many different examples. Perhaps after our break, if we come back to the discussion time, people may think of examples to try to, clarify what's a fruitful and useful way to just recognize the state of mind. Even like when something is painful, whether it's physically painful or emotionally or psychologically painful, we might be like running away from the pain, so we didn't want to see it. But if we're cultivating this practice of being aware of our state of mind, just to say, oh, this is painful, and just acknowledging it makes so many things possible in terms of developing wisdom, and actually in terms of letting go of the clinging. It's like, while we are running away from our own state of mind, the running away is a kind of clinging. But if we stop running away and we just face it, then that's a kind of letting go. It seems opposite, but it's really true. In the Chittanupassana, in the Satipatthana, the first two pairs are the ones that are the most important, which is noticing when sensual greed, desire is present, or when sensual desire is not present, noticing when aversion is present, noticing when aversion is not present. Even just doing meditations and doing a frequent, sort of like a soul check-in on those 4 points to know what the mind is about on those 4 points is very valuable in terms of getting a hold of what would be the significance of being able to see and be aware of one's state of mind. If you see that the state of mind is on the wholesome side, like being free from anger or free from sensual desire, then you may feel happy and relieved and just continue with what you're doing. And if you see that the state of mind is on the unwholesome side, then you have to use the methods to try to step away from that unwholesome mental state. It could be that just seeing and recognizing is enough to step away from it. It could be that substitution is the skillful way to step away from an unwholesome state. It could be that without getting too intellectual, briefly, look at the causation, like where this is coming from and where it's heading, saying, this state is here because of causes and conditions, and saying, harboring this state of mind leads to danger. And that could be enough to dispel it. Very often we have the confusion. It's a vipallasa, the distortions. So if you think that anger is good for you, then you will stay angry. But if you understand that anger is poison, then as soon as you understand it, the mind would naturally pull away from it. And it's very surprising the extent to which a person can be confused about whether or not a particular state of mind is leading to the end of suffering or leading towards the perpetuation of suffering. Once you see it correctly, then it's not such a struggle or a challenge to give up something that's harmful. If you touched a hot stove by accident, you would immediately pull back intuitively. You wouldn't just, keep holding onto it and burn your hands seriously. Well, you might, but that would be another kind of psychological issue if someone were doing that. So then this seeing the danger clearly, seeing your state of mind in the context of causation, that's one of the techniques. One of the techniques is stepping down gradually, bit by bit. So if the treat seems to be, extremely desired and is arousing your greed, then if you could say, well, is this treat really 100% pleasant? And say, like, after I've digested it, will it still be 100% pleasant? Or after, if I use too much, is after I take this sugar and I get the little bit of the high and then I get the crash, is that still going to be pleasant? And so just examining the aspect of that object that's different. So it's not like 100% one thing. Something that's hateful or despicable, it's not 100% despicable. Everything is a mixture. It's partly that, and it's partly otherwise. And so changing the perspective to see it in a different perspective allows you to gradually step away from being locked into the unwholesome reaction. So the Vitakka Santana Sutta gives the different ways of tranquilizing the unwholesome thoughts or the harmful thoughts. Earlier on this spring, we were studying about the destruction of the taints. That's the destruction of the poison or the taint of sensual desire, the taint of existence or the desire for eternal life in heaven, and the taint of ignorance or the taint of delusion. And one of the things that we discovered is that is the deep ground of Buddhist ethics is really about that goal, the destruction of the taints. So it's not because if I, if I hit somebody, or if I steal something, or if I tell a lie, it's not just because it's going to cause somebody to be angry. It's not just because it's going to cause somebody to feel sad that makes those things unskillful and unethical behaviors. It's because those behaviors perpetuate the state of mind that keeps us going around in samsara, both for ourselves and also for the other. So it's like there's not, when we realize anatta, we get beyond just looking at it at the individual level. So we don't have to think that having this ethics, which is dedicated to liberation, is just because we're selfishly wanting me to be liberated. Actually, like a liberation is happening, and it's sort of you could say that there is impersonal aspect to liberation, and whatever we do that could be construed as being for the liberation of an individual, say, well, by the time you approach that, the individuality or the personal aspect has kind of become a non-issue anyway. And actually, in reality, you are truly creating a possibility for other individuals to step away from that merry-go-round. And so that's how the social side of Buddhism is happening. I wish I could find the citation for it, because I found this statement, then I lost it. I have to find it again, in which I think it was Sariputta. He didn't say it causes you to be free from sensual desire. He just said it causes sensual desire to be destroyed. It causes the destruction of sensual desire. It causes the destruction of clinging to existence. It causes the destruction of ignorance. And so he wasn't speaking of those traits in terms of being mine. So that's interesting, isn't it? So I think that's a way that we can square the circle as far as the fear that or the potential criticism, thinking that Buddhist ethics are not generous because we're just, a person is thinking about their personal liberation and not thinking about the world. We are including the world in that wish. But the most clearest and most reliable way of knowing whether this state of mind is wholesome and worth cultivating, or unwholesome and good to be abandoned, is if we can get into our hearts a pretty clear sense of what the sensual craving, what the craving for resistance, and what the ignorance is. If we understand what those are, it's I don't want to say like a flavor, it's like when sensual craving, when the negatives are present, it's like a shadow. And when they're not present, it's like a clarity, like a light. And that can become a guideline that can be observed with our paccavekkhana, with our reflection. And so then, as we go through the day, coping with all the difficult problems and the all the people we have to meet with, all of their emotions, all of their reactions, all of the judgments, all of the bad things, all of the dukkha that's happening in the whole world, all of the grief and sorrow that's happening in the whole world because of the sort of the accumulated residue of all of the mistaken choices that have been made by us and by everyone through all of this history. And so like we're confronting all of this. How can we have a clear state of mind? But we can. We can see, like, as we I guess confront the darkness, we can see that, like, within ourselves, do we have the brightness of that clear state of mind, which is, to whatever extent, free from those poisons, free from those taints. And that reflection can unlock our intuitive ability to cope with the many difficult choices that we have to make as we're facing out to the social world. I think I'm not going to take questions now because we're going to have a discussion in 15 minutes at 2:30. So I invite each of you to go get a cup of a juice or a cup of tea. If you're in a hot place, you can get a cool beverage. And if you're in a place that get whatever kind of beverage you like, stretch the body and come back at 2:30 in California time. And I have a lovely cup of tea, but I could use a glass of cool water. Doesn't need ice, or a glass of juice, or half and half, juice and water, half and half. Thank you. Simpson.